Hello and welcome to the Event Marketers Toolbox. Happy Thursday. I hope everybody's doing great. I am Chris Dunn. I am with Blue Hive Exhibits, and I'm super happy to have a couple of friends from the event industry on today. Really looking forward to this conversation with Janice Cardinale. But before we get to her, I have a guest co-host. You've seen him before. You know him, you love him. Brendon Hamlin of Hamlin Creative. Hey, Brendon, how's it going?
Hey, Chris. It's going great. Other than some poison ivy, I'm doing great. That'll be a different show. But
That's a different show.
yeah. But no, thanks for having me back. I'm happy to be here today, especially with Janice. I'm Brendon Hamlin. I run Hamlin Creative. We're a production company that focuses on strategy and executing content in and around live events. So that's trade shows or experiential or activations. It's that whole world of in-person events, and so we create content in and around those spaces. So, but that's not why we're here today. Today we are here because we have Janice Cardinale with us. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you, Brendon. I'm so pleased to be here. Anywhere I can advocate and create awareness matters.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for joining us. You were active in the chat last week and really kind of got to know you through some work that you and Brendon had done together. And we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on that. As we kind of jump into our show, before we get too far along, we talk a little bit about our sponsors. We have two sponsors, Blue Hive, who is my employer, creative group. We are located on both the West Coast and the East Coast. So we have a Vegas location, which we full functioning shop and warehouse and so forth to support the West Coast market. Our headquarters are outside of Boston. We got started about 20 years ago, and we kind of like to feel like we're in that sweet spot for up and coming brands that are growing. We're a little over 100 people, so we're not a small group, and we're not the big ones where you get lost and you just turn into a number. In addition to that, we also are sponsored by Fist Bump. And Fist Bump is an agency, kind of came across them a couple of years ago. I got involved with the founder and started with some LinkedIn work that they do for founders and sales leaders and so forth. And eventually we arrived at them being a group that could help us put together a podcast. This is exactly what we're looking at right here. We are half a year in, so we've got 26, 27 episodes under our belt, and it's been so great to talk to so many event professionals. We are doing our best to build a community of like-minded event professionals here that are supporting each other, that are sharing information, that are kind of touching on all of these different topics to help make us better at our jobs. And today we're going to do exactly that. We're going to really dive into more of kind of a look at our mental health across the board in the event industry. So Janice, I know you're going to end up doing an awful lot of sharing and talking about your story. But we're going to have Juana put up a QR code that can take people to a survey. So why don't you maybe start out by talking just a little bit about that, and then we're going to kind of jump in with, how you got involved with this amazing cause.
The survey is a vehicle for us to create some research in the industry now, 5 years after COVID, to enable us to understand where people are feeling now about their mental health and their well-being, about their workplace situations, because often what we don't see is often behind the scenes and how people are feeling. A lot of people, don't want to have their reputations affected, or they have shame about how they're feeling, and there's a stigma potentially there. So the best way to bring action to the industry and change the narrative is to do a survey and then do the research and then create the curriculum. And I'm very fortunate to be working with a PhD out of Montreal who teaches the Masters of Psychology program at McGill University. And you have to have somebody from academia to do this properly. So I have had many years of experience in the event industry. I owned a company for 20 years. So between the two of us, we are in a good place right now that is just gathering information. And the support throughout the industry has been very positive. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that's super exciting. We were in the green room, obviously, prior to the show, and talking a little bit about some of the places that you're going to be able to see, large organizations with under, within the event forum, kind of rolling out this survey. So we're really looking forward to shining a light on this. Just before we really jump in, this is a live show. We are right here today, and we encourage you to drop some comments and let us know where you're listening from, where you're tuning in from. And if at any point you want to ask a question, we'll do our best to get to that question, and go ahead and run with that. And then in addition, obviously this is taped. Do we say taped anymore? Everything's digital. I don't know, Brendon, that's a question for you. It's recorded, and it will be shared. It'll be available here on LinkedIn. It'll be available on YouTube. And then it also shows up on all of your favorite podcast platforms as well. So we are everywhere. But all right, so that's good. Hopefully we'll see a lot of activity within the comments today. And I want to get us started. So Janice, you kind of hinted at it, but why is mental health a critical for event professionals? Give us a little bit of your backstory that will kind of paint this picture.
My backstory and the reason why it's important to event professionals are different, but my backstory and, the truth is that I've experienced depression. And when you have experienced it, you know what it feels like to go through it, and it's very crippling mentally. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing. But the other part of the reason is that after COVID, of course, there needed to be platforms where people could speak together and feel safe together to, enable a conversation about, how they're feeling. And often it's, I found there was a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety that was turning into depression for quite a few people. And we're not talking about diagnosed depression here. We're talking about depression from loss of work, from family issues, from, all kinds of different things. So the article that I wrote on LinkedIn ended up resonating with a lot of people, which is what really, pulled me in. And I began a community called Event Minds Matter, which is aptly named. And we started to create advocacy and awareness through pillars that we spent 6 months looking at. And those pillars mainly came about because we looked at the things that, as event professionals, what we didn't like about the industry, what we thought were the problems prior to COVID. So that enabled us to create the pillars. And then we sort of spread out from there, and people started to follow slowly but surely. But over the last 3.5 years, so much has changed. So much has come about, and it's no longer the discussion around COVID. It's more of a discussion around, geopolitics, the world, the, people losing their jobs again, not being able to feed their families, people being afraid to travel. It's all kinds of things. So I would have hoped by now we would be getting better and continue on that road of, yay, everything's great, but it's not. It's not. So with it being something that has never really been recognized in our industry, insofar as wellness has been recognized, everybody has, come to the table to talk about wellness, to offer, retreats for vacationers or corporate business. Hotels have come up with amazing corporate wellness programs, but all of that is driven by profit. None of that is driven really by prioritizing people. So I just had a conversation the other day with somebody who we were talking about EAPs versus benefits versus training. And the one thing that I know about our industry globally is that there is no training for psychological safety or emotional intelligence in our industry. And the reason that I talk about this is because it's so important to the fact that I don't know you, Brendon, or you, Chris, if you've ever had to deal with people in recognizing a problem in the workplace and knowing how to respond to it. Because there are a lot of people who don't know how to respond to it. And sometimes what people say in the workplace can trigger somebody in a way that's very dangerous. So I think that by creating a program where we have those, lessons on how to respond and what somebody can do who feels they're under toxic leadership, how they can respond back. This is what we're trying to do. And so that's the premise of this whole thing. And the survey is important because everybody is going to get us to where we have to go next.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's tremendous, and you're right. One of the other things that we had some side conversations prior, and you mentioned, dealing with a person who's an experienced person, been in the event game for a number of years, and from the hustle culture, right, where it was more of a toughen up, buttercup kind of a I don't give a crap about what you feel. Here's what I need, right? And we were taught, those of us who entered the workforce a bunch of years ago, that work is work, right? And you do what you need to do, and you jump through those hoops. And sometimes it means giving up your weekend and giving up your vacation with your family and all that stuff. And I'm really pleased that we're, at a place where we can at least talk about it, right? And look at that.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Brendon, you and Janice worked on a wonderful campaign, and I want to take the appropriate amount of time to kind of dive into that. So tell us a little bit about how you guys got connected, and then this 30 days of 30 voices, and kind of where that came from, and what have some of the results been.
Yeah, well, I can share the production side of it, and then Janice can really talk about the origins of it. But I connected with Janice 6 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, and we struck up a conversation and started talking about what she does. And she had collected voices at IMEX last year, and was trying to figure out exactly what to do with them. And so we were talking about it, and she had one idea, and then we talked a little bit more, and it felt like it really could become a campaign. And so she had collected all these voices across the events space from that event. And I looked at it and I said, hey, look, we really could create an effective campaign, because you have all these different people. We put it in a template and we roll that out every day in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so she provided the content, and we basically packaged it up and delivered the campaign back to her. But Janice, maybe talk a little bit about how that, what was the origin of that idea, and then how is it, what has been the ramifications and results of rolling out that campaign?
Before I get into that, I just want to say that working with you was seamless, and it was an incredible experience. Like I speak the truth, and there are lots of video production companies, but working with you, I found your company to be ultra professional. And I remember the night that your wife said something to me about Brendon's not even sleeping yet. And it was like 2 a.m. So I know how you work. You work like I do, unfortunately, which is all hours of the day.
And kind of what we're talking about here today, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's because we're habitual. We're older.
Yeah.
But how this whole thing got started really was through Michael Hoffman, which owns a company. He owns a company called Gathering Voices. And I was looking for a way to bring more attention to mental health and emotional intelligence in the industry. And I thought that maybe by doing a video, it might be a great idea to, talk to people at IMEX about how they felt about mental health. And then in turn, ask them whether they felt if psychological safety and emotional intelligence training would be effective and would benefit people in this industry. And not so much the people like myself who are elders of the industry, but certainly the next generation of event professionals who are coming up. I know from talking to them and having mentored them for 10 years during my tenure at a college as a board chair, that they have a very different perspective than I ever had about work. And it's a good perspective, because they realize they want to put their lives front of work and try to blend that in a way that everybody, can have some joy in their life and not always feel that they're manifesting, physically or mentally with what they're doing, because there's so much of a lack of support within organizations right now. The budgets have been cut. People are doing way more, as we all know. It's been going on for many years, long past COVID. And people are reaching a point where, they can't handle it anymore. And especially in the elder generations, I've seen the effects of what that can look like on friends of mine in the industry, and it's not pretty. So it's a wake-up call. And it was a wake-up call a long time ago, but nobody was willing to really take it on and keep fighting for it. So even though you can create awareness and advocacy and try to build a brave space within an organization so it can amplify a conversation, it's not the way that it is in every organization. In fact, it weighs more on people who are not, or using this theory in organizations, like creating that culture, than it does those who have culture. So I've spoken to both, so I understand, where we stand in the industry as a whole. And I think that, to do this properly, having these videos attracted a tremendous amount of attention, because it couldn't be my voice any longer. It had to be the voices of respected leaders out there to share with everybody what they thought. Because I know that there is a lot of things that people won't say in front of some people. And so therefore, this is what I was trying to do. And it worked out very well, because what I was interested in was attracting the attention of the Events Industry Council, who governs the curriculum insofar as getting your CMP, which is Certified Meeting Professional, CMM, which is Certified Meeting Manager, and now CITP, which is Certified in Central Travel Professional. So it's very interesting from my experience with them to learn that education for curriculum is typically only reviewed once every 5 years. And that probably has more to do with, once you've taken your exam through EIC, it's another 5 years before you have to take the exam again. So you'd be looking at what's happened in the last 5 years before you change the curriculum. The issue for me personally, and some people who are not certified, is that so much happens within a 5-year period. And it's in this day and age, with so much change in the industry, I think that we have to be able to be more flexible and react to change faster. So I had an opportunity to speak with them, and it was a great conversation. And I told them that I am going to do a survey. I told them that I had a colleague of mine in Montreal who's a PhD and has spent a lot of time in research and in academia. And she is the professor of the master's program in psychology at McGill. So her and I have worked with a focus group. We've created a survey, which is where you'll find on the QR code today. And that survey is going to help us do a research paper, which in hopefully will turn into curriculum for the industry. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're certified or you're not certified. Take this and learn how to recognize and respond. But it's also for the employees to understand how they can deal with situations in the workplace that occur and they don't know what to do. They're afraid to say, they're afraid to go to HR. So these are actually trainings for them as well. So I can't see anybody not wanting to have this. If it makes you better at your job and it helps the organization maintain the talent that they have, there's no negative or downside to this. So that's a little bit about that.
I think what you did in putting this together was that you brought all these voices into the light, and you brought people that, across a whole spectrum, there were 60 some odd videos you sent me, and we could only use half of them, but there were so many different people speaking out that I think that what you did was you really opened up that conversation to allow more people in to say, well, maybe I've got something I want to talk about, or making it safe, I think. And that was really an important thing that you did. And I was proud to be a part of it. So are you seeing more results, or more people coming into the conversation now from, not
Yes.
necessarily if that's exactly from that campaign, but I'm sure it helped, right?
There's no question. It was the catalyst, in my opinion, for change. It's what helped propel the survey.
Yeah.
And to be very honest, what I'm seeing now is an incredible amount of support for it. I have a lot of followers on LinkedIn, and I live on LinkedIn in terms of, I don't have a website, but so people know what I do and people know what the mission is about. But I cannot get over, there's somebody in Australia that I've met who has some of the most incredible content. His name is Ian Morrison, and he just put it out, and like, it was unbelievable how many people he got looking at this. So we're not reaching just North America, we're reaching into Europe and Australia, and people want change. People have said, thank you for doing this. Thank you for finally, really taking this on in the way you are and helping us. Yeah. So that is so encouraging and so empowering. And, what that does is fuels me even more to get through this and get it done, get the curriculum organized, and really, I can sit back maybe 10 years from now and look at what it really did, and I would like to think that it really helped improve, what's going on, the conversation, the way that people are in the workplace. There's other organizations too that I follow that are doing a heck of a job. But, there's an organization, because I live in Canada, but most of my audience is from the States. But there's an organization in the States that is called End Workplace Abuse. And that particular organization is going after, building laws in every single state to help people, who have really been bullied and sabotaged in the workplace. Because there's a lot of that. And in the United States, I don't know if everybody realizes, but there are no laws, no labor laws that protect anybody in terms of psychological safety. And what fuels a lot of toxic leaders is engagement. If they know they have you and they can continue and engaging you in a way that is harassing you, how do you deal with that? And again, this is the whole point of curriculum. Okay, it teaches you tips and tricks, because if you learn how not to let them fuel you and walk away from it, or have the right thing to say to them, that's critical, and that's, to me, the kind of training that we need. And I've always said communication is one of the most important factors, no matter where you work or what industry you work in.
Yeah.
And, when I think about our industry, yes, we communicate, we tell great stories, but we also tell stories of truth that are not so great. So what stories do we want to tell 10 years from now? Are we still going to be talking about mental health 10 years from now and how we all feel? I would hate to think that. I mean, I'd like to see the joy come out of this. That's the modus operandi.
Yeah. I hope we can get there. So Jameer, we see you. I don't know if there was some difficulty in maybe getting into the chat, but his comment of why can't I get into the meeting? But we can see that comment. So hopefully we get some other folks kind of weighing in. Let us know where you are, and if you want to kind of weigh in on this conversation. Janice, your business, Event Minds Matter, is powered by Club Ichi. What does that mean? So Liz Latham was one of our early guests. I think she was episode 6 or 7. She's wonderful, so well, versed in all things events. But you guys have obviously kind of teamed up, and I would imagine that she had several thousand people within her community. I can imagine that was a big kind of bolster for both of you guys to kind of unite and again shine a light on this super important situation that we're all kind of facing, and we've been reticent to talk about it in the past.
I have to hand it to Liz. She has done a magnificent job at bringing people together. When I first met Liz, it was right at the very beginning of her having Club Ichi, and she did her first telethon. And I can't even remember how we got connected, if you want to know the truth, but it was the best connection I've ever made in the last year or two.
Yeah.
She is very much aligned with well-being. I mean, David T. Stevens and Nicole and her are all, passionate about what they're doing. But what I love about what Club Ichi is about is the fact that they include everybody, that they have created a situation where, you pay your membership, but everything comes with it. There's so much education. There's so many fun things that she writes about every day, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. And she includes everybody. Like it's where people are coming together and just sharing, but sharing in an honest, truthful, and, unexpected ways. Like, it's incredible. If being on the Slack channel, for example, like, if somebody's looking for something, they say in Slack, okay, I'm looking for such and such and such and such a city. And all of a sudden she makes it available. So when I came to her with Event Minds Matter, I said to her, I can't do this by myself. I need more strength, more people, whatever. So we decided to align together. There was nothing to buy, because Event Minds Matter is not a for-profit company. And it's not a not-for-profit company either, because then I'd need board members, and I don't want to go through all of that. It's strictly a community as a give back from myself. And the way in which she supported it is she has allowed our voices, those who write for Event Minds Matter, which are many different kinds of people. I always invite people to tell a story, but that's what it's, what's happened with it. And I'm grateful to even have Liz as a friend, because she's very clear on how she thinks about things. And she is providing something that I have yet to see in any association. And that's just engagement, people embracing, people sharing, and people just feeling human. And I think that's the whole thing, is that when we talk about human connection over this last couple of years, her community is the role model for human connection. So that's how I feel about Liz and Nicole and David.
Pretty strong endorsement. We love that. So, one of the other things that you were saying earlier is, you spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I think obviously here we are broadcasting as one of our channels. But this platform has really kind of created a tremendous connection point, and it's how I've been hanging out with Brendon for about a year or so. We've not yet met in person, but we've become friends over this platform, and I know you guys, have really kind of formed your bond in the same fashion. We do see a little bit of shade and hate on LinkedIn. I don't think it's anything like some of the other social platforms where people are just angry and they're going after each other on a regular basis. We're building, again, we're just kind of using this tool, and we're building this community, which is wonderful. So sharing it and kind of, sharing these ideas that ultimately can help everybody, deal with the stresses, and to kind of circle back and talk a little bit about, both of you guys have a tremendous work ethic, and you're up late at night and you're working on stuff, right? So by no means are we saying that, that this is a soft situation, or people just don't have a work ethic and they don't want to work hard anymore, right? But it's a matter of establishing boundaries and saying, this is, I'm willing to do the work, but I can't be, giving up my entire life, to bang out stuff in the next 24 hours just because this potential client demanded it, right? So we have to kind of, I guess, maybe just reframe, some of us who are, from the old school, the Gen Xers or boomers, who kind of grew up working in a certain fashion and thinking in a certain fashion. We have to reframe that a little bit. And to your, to your point, just like making sure that that the millennials and the Gen Z folks who are coming into it, see the right way to do it and establish those boundaries going forward.
Right.
There's one of the people that was in the videos is a friend of all of ours, Rich Rodriguez, and he said in his video that one of the challenges for really dealing with mental health awareness is that the people that are in the event business are people pleasers. And so that, I mean, it's almost as if the folks in the event business in a way are working against themselves because they want to help, because they want to fulfill and really shine and do the very best they can, and sometimes put themselves even in a position that pushes them beyond what is reasonable. So I think there's two sides there. Not only is it, a manager or a client or whatever and their demands, but also the individual saying, I gotta build my own wall off my own self, because I'm not going to make it if I don't. So I think that's an interesting kind of, there's a duality there that I'm sure is different than in other places where you might just be dealing with a physical safety issue. The mental safety issue is a whole other element of it, right?
Right.
It's interesting. I had a conversation yesterday with somebody who's been in HR for many, many years, because I'm looking at different areas of how things affect mental health. And I was speaking to her because often what's come up in my mind is when people, or I know people actually, who have gone to HR, and the next thing they know is they're signing an NDA and they're out.
Yeah.
So we had a discussion about that yesterday, and I've asked her to please start writing for me, because she was a wealth of information. And not that she's worked specifically in events, but she's worked for more than enough years for big corporations that she understands, what the responsibility is of HR and how people should be approaching HR with what and what not to do. So I found it just really, curious. And the other thing I'm very curious about too, and I'm getting more into this too, is the governance within our industry and how really governance is created. And I'm learning a lot about that as well, because governance in the United States, or even within our industry, is different than governance in another industry. Associations are different than non-associations, nonprofit associations. So, it's all part and parcel of the policies and procedures that are created, by the human resource departments that contribute to the governance. So it's been eye-opening, I must tell you. I didn't know this stuff when I had a company. I knew that I had to have a policies and procedures book, but what I didn't know, and this came about, I actually spoke in the Senate in Boston, Massachusetts a couple of weeks ago on behalf of End Workplace Abuse. And the reason I spoke was because they're trying to pass this bill, okay, to end workplace abuse and have a law, against the abusers. So, when I spoke, I listened to other people's stories, and it was mind-boggling to hear how people are being treated in the United States, and I'm not saying that they're leaders or anything like that. They're just people, humans who are working in jobs where, honestly, the lies and the radical behavior of human beings to a boss to an employee is just horrific, and it's been going on for a very long time. This is not new, but it really opens your eyes and makes you think, wow, like there are people that can be worse than, a terrifying animal. And I listen to that and it's, wow, like, oh my God. And we don't see. People are wearing masks in our industry. So if they're going through something with, a form of narcissism in their leadership, it's a problem. And the girl in HR said, it's not always about, I know that HR is for the employer, not necessarily the employee, but she was always for both. She said there were situations that she had to, do her due diligence, and she got rid of leaders, who were causing all the problems within an organization. Like, they're the ones that, try to stay under the radar, but there's a lot of, as I said before, a lot of lies being told. to pull themselves up. And I think that these days leaders need to check their egos at the door. I think that they also have a responsibility to lead by virtue of being a coach, a mentor, and a teacher. Not just somebody who controls what the end result is going to be and not listen at all to the people who work for them, okay, on what maybe a better result could be. And I said recently in a post, I said, the people who are working for us now, as an example, we're going to be working for them in the future.
Yeah.
I know it's hard, it's funny, but I think the tables are really turning.
Yeah.
And we need the young people because they're the ones that are going to teach us how to move our companies forward. I mean, they know more about AI than I ever will.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think, and I don't know what the exact stats are, but I think within either 25 or 26, there will be more millennials and Gen Z in the workplace than there are Gen X and boomers, right? So this younger group is literally going to, they are in buying positions. They are leadership positions. And those of us who stick around in the workforce for a while, you're absolutely right. My boss, the CEO of my company, is a mid-30s young woman, and it's tremendous because she leads in a very different way than her dad did before her. Both awesome humans, but she brings a different flavor to it. So, I took your survey. I work in a great culture, within Blue Hive. We're not perfect, but I found myself feeling like I might skew the answers because I was like, by and large, like things are really good. But I know that they're not like that all over.
no,
And
but that's why we need lots of people to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also I'm just thinking about, at the time of this recording, this is not a worker's market, right? Jobs are few and far between. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people who will listen to this who are out there who are in a situation where they wish they could walk out the door because they're tired of putting up with the BS or being treated like crap or whatever the case may be. But because there aren't a lot of other jobs that they can move to, they probably feel kind of trapped, right? So this information that you're working on is so critical, certainly. So, and that kind of takes me to my next question. So when you're kind of creating this curriculum, what does that look like? I know you're working with your associate, and hopefully she's listening in. I'm actually going to Montreal for a show next week, so I'll have to stop by McGill University and check in, and see how the information's flowing.
I'm sure she'd be happy to meet you for a coffee.
Yeah, that would be great.
I can't tell you really what's going to go into this specific curriculum. Okay. I just know for me personally, I want to see, there's several ways that people can learn about, how to frame things up as a leader, for example, and how you present, and also how to respond to, somebody who may be going through something that you have no idea about, and may not even, by the way, be something that was triggered in the workspace. It could be something they're bringing in from home. So there's all kinds of different reasons why people behave the way that they do. But I think that when people, use emotional intelligence, there is a calmer way to create a culture where people feel safe to come and talk to you about something that's on their minds. If that culture is not created, then people just lock it in and work through it until they can find something better, to be honest with you, because most people would suggest that, why are you staying? And of course they're staying because they need the money, because they have food to put on their table, because they have a family at home that depends on them. But there are so many tips and tricks that will be provided in the curriculum to help people. I wrote actually about it this week. I compared mental health to the game of chess, and how, you need mental strategy in chess to play the game. But often, the kings are the ones that always try to win the board. And it's somewhat of a control game. So, I have read so many different kinds of articles, and there's so many ways in which we can train people in an integral way that they feel good about themselves. They feel empowered by the education to be able to go out there and work within a team. And I think that's very important.
Excellent. Very timely indeed. We're at the 40-minute mark, and we aim for around 45 minutes or so. So we're doing great. I think we've had a tremendous conversation. One little signature thing that we like to do, Janice, and you've shared so much already, so I'm not sure if there's more to, I'm sure you could talk for hours and hours on this passionate topic of yours, but we like to kind of end with, 3 kind of key takeaways that you can leave our audience with. So whether it's something you've already discussed, or you want to kind of put a bow on some things, or introduce a new idea, but are there 3 kind of actionable items or takeaways that you could kind of leave our audience with?
I think the first would be not to stay silent. I think silence is, a demon, to be honest with you, that people don't realize by being silent that they're not helping themselves, or even helping the people that are committing, the crime, so to speak. I think that there is a lot of information, certainly from Event Minds Matter, on tips of how to speak with people, how to protect yourself. A lot of what happens also has to do with the person. If the person doesn't want to learn anything new or change the circumstances of how they're feeling, that's a problem in itself, because you can bring a horse to water, you can't make it drink.
Right.
So, I think that also employers, leaders need to understand that with all of their budget cuts, cutting human training on something like this, or not bringing it in at all, is a huge mistake in today's day and age. We wouldn't be talking about this before COVID if it wasn't for COVID. But, the thing is that it's funny how so much money is spent on, let's say, EAP and benefits. And when I spoke to the HR person yesterday, the one thing she said is training is the most important thing that you could ever do with people. The amount of training that could be done and be successful would eliminate a lot of the benefits that people need. People, companies are sinking a fortune into insurance, and I'm not taking anything away from insurance, but why don't we think clearly about, if we could take some money and train everybody, okay, we wouldn't have the big expense of the benefits. And what, will people need as much therapy? If we're just going to say, oh yeah, go see a therapist, and you're coming back to the same workplace environment, that's not going to help.
Right.
So those are just a very few, takeaways, but I think let's do something that's human focused. Let's prioritize our people first, because people are going to bring the profit. It's, if every leader were to think, okay, profit, and you have to meet this, this goal, okay, how do they meet the goal when they're not well? How do they meet the goal when they're keeping everything inside because they're so scared of their reputation and saying anything about it? The whole point of this is to get people talking, is to create conversation, communication, and to make people feel like they belong to something. So I've read enough stories like you guys have about connection, belonging, and this and that and the other thing, but how come companies are still in the same circumstances and people feel the way they do to this day? Because not enough people are doing it.
Yeah. Now you bring up a really great point. It's kind of like proactively, taking, and mental health is obviously part of our overall health, but, taking a proactive approach to, working out and watching what we eat and so forth,
Right.
is the best way to keep ourselves from needing to go to the doctor all the time, or needing to be in the hospital. And this is almost no different at all, right? It's like doing that work ahead of time so that you don't end up, needing insurance, because you need to talk to that therapist all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and for those, folks who may be tuning in that are business owners, when you think about like, what does it cost when you lose a valuable employee? What's the cost of that person, whether it was, quote unquote burnout, or they just, got to a point where they were so frustrated that they had to kind of walk out the door and get a reset on their life. Replacing a valuable employee like that is extremely disruptive to a company and extremely costly to try to find the right person to fill that slot. So when we think about managing that human capital and giving our people the tools that they need to manage what they're feeling, right? Like to your point, Janice, like that seems like money well spent.
Exactly. I agree with you. And it really is.
Yeah.
It's such a simple, easy thing to do that I can't believe how hard it's taken and how long it's taken me to get to this point. There's been so much pushback. And what I really feel is that I think that leadership is afraid. I think there's fear on both sides of the table. The elders in our event industry, or whatever part of the industry, trade show, conference, hospitality, whatever it is, have not been taught emotional intelligence. They're elders. I know that I was never taught when I was, of high school or university age. And I took the course much later in life because I was curious and I wanted to understand how to frame up things in business. So, I don't blame them sometimes for the fear that they have, but I also say to them, since you're here and you're staying, and why are they staying? Because, unfortunately, they took out mortgages on their houses and at their banks for their businesses, and they're forced to stay longer than retirement age. A lot of the elders in this industry would have been long gone happily, okay, because they've spent their years, but they have to stay. So how can elders and young people work together in an environment where everybody benefits and the company benefits in moving forward from an understanding that everybody is well and the talent is being well used and they're well appreciated? I think the biggest thing that young people tell me is they feel that they're unappreciated, that they're not being respected. And yes, young people have their shtick, and I use that word loosely, but if you're a good leader and you understand that you as opposed to like just managing them, okay, or giving somebody else the job to manage them, are you really teaching them and coaching them and mentoring them? Today, now there are more mentors than ever before. People in this industry are looking for that. And there are organizations and associations within this industry that really propel that and say how important it is. I have somebody right now I'm mentoring, she's a solopreneur, which, by the way, that's another thing that's on the rise, solopreneurship, because these are young people who want to start up their own businesses, but they've also come from bad situations in corporate. And they don't want to have that kind of environment or space again. They want to be in comfortable, honest places. Yeah. So, it's a very like secular kind of thing. And a lot of what goes on is systemic. It's hard to, keep it down.
Yeah. Well, I mean, shining a light on it and getting people talking about it is obviously, how we're ultimately going to arrive at a solution for this and fix it. So this has been an awesome conversation. I appreciate both of you guys coming to the table. This is, we like to certainly have fun and typically kind of keep it light here. This is a little heavier, but it's absolutely something we need to talk about and making sure that we're all in a good, mental health space. So
let's try to make it lighter.
Yeah, exactly. Before we wrap up, Janice, what's the best way for people who are sitting there thinking, I really need to get more Janice Cardinale in my life, or I need to get a hold of her and learn more about this? What's the best way to reach out and contact you?
Over LinkedIn, either on my personal LinkedIn or on Event Minds Matter. I mean, on both places, I, write about this entire situation from various different points of view. But I am an open door. I don't say no to anybody unless they're trying to sell me something I don't need. Right? And it happens a lot.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
anyways,
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Brendon, always a pleasure to have you on board.
Thank you.
We're actually just a little teeing up a little focus for next week. We got another Canadian joining us, like 2 weeks in a row. Evan Babbins is going to join us next week, and Brendon will again be in the hot seat, the co-host seat. So thanks to both of you guys. You've made for a tremendous conversation today. Super important, topic that we all need to kind of, make sure that we're not brushing under the rug. And
Yes.
with that, we'll say goodbye and happy eventing out there, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, the rest of your week. And again, thanks so much for tuning in, and cheers to both of you guys. Appreciate you very much.
Thank you.